Welcome to my YouTube channel, Shadow Whispers Another Story. True horror stories so creepy you'll sleep with the lights on. Part 1, The Whispering Walls. It started with the whispers. I had just moved into my new apartment, a cozy little studio on the 3rd floor of an old brick building. The rent was cheap and the location was perfect, just a short walk from work and surrounded by cafes and parks. But from the very first night, something felt off. The walls were thin, and at first I thought the whispers were just my neighbors talking. But as the days went by, I noticed something strange. The voices didn't sound like normal conversation. They were low, guttural, and filled with a malice that made my skin crawl. I tried to ignore them, telling myself it was just the building settling or the pipes creaking. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent, until I could hear them even during the day. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I pressed my ear against the wall, trying to make out what they were saying. The moment I did, the voices stopped. The silence was deafening. And then, I heard it, a single word, whispered so softly, it was almost inaudible. Run. Part 2, The Shadow in the Corner. The whispers were just the beginning. A few nights later, I woke up to the sound of footsteps. At first, I thought it was just my upstairs neighbor, but the sound was coming from inside my apartment. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding as I scanned the room. The moonlight streaming through the window cast long shadows across the floor, but everything seemed normal. Then I saw it. In the far corner of the room, a shadow moved. It was darker than the others, almost solid, and it seemed to pulse with a life of its own. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as the shadow shifted, growing larger and more defined. It was the shape of a person. I wanted to scream, to run, to do anything but sit there and watch as the shadow stepped out of the corner and into the moonlight. But I couldn't move. The figure stood at the foot of my bed, its featureless face turned toward me. I could feel its gaze, cold and unyielding, as it leaned closer. And then it spoke. You shouldn't have listened. Part 3, The Hidden Room. The next morning, I called my landlord. There's something wrong with my apartment, I said, my voice trembling. I keep hearing voices, and last night I saw something. The landlord sighed, as if he'd heard this before. Look, I'll come by and take a look, but I'm telling you, it's an old building. It's probably just the pipes. He arrived an hour later, a toolbox in hand, and spent the next 30 minutes checking the walls and floors. Everything seems fine, he said, packing up his tools. But if you hear anything else, let me know. As he turned to leave, I noticed something strange. The wall behind my dresser looked different. The paint was slightly darker, and there was a faint line running along the edge, as if it had been patched up. I waited until the landlord was gone, then moved the dresser aside. The wall was indeed different. It was a door. My hands trembled as I reached for the handle, my mind racing with possibilities. What could be behind it? A storage space? A hidden room? The door creaked open, revealing a small, windowless room. The air was thick with dust, and the walls were covered in strange symbols, crude drawings of eyes, hands, and mouths, all etched into the plaster. But what caught my attention was the chair. It sat in the center of the room, facing the door, as if waiting for someone to sit in it. And on the seat was a single piece of paper, yellowed with age and covered in the same symbols as the walls. I picked it up, my heart pounding as I read the words scrawled across the top. Do not sit in the chair. Part 4, The ritual. I spent the next few days researching the symbols, scouring the internet for any clues about their meaning. What I found chilled me to the bone. They were part of a ritual, a summoning ritual. According to the articles I read, the symbols were used to call forth something that wasn't supposed to exist. And the chair was the focal point, the place where the summoner would sit to complete the ritual. But something had gone wrong. The articles mentioned a case from the 1980s where a man had tried to perform the ritual in his apartment. He had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only the symbols and the chair. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in the same apartment. That night, I heard the whispers again. They were louder now, more urgent, and they seemed to be coming from the hidden room. I tried to ignore them, burying myself under the covers and squeezing my eyes shut. But the voices grew louder, more insistent, until I could hear them even over the sound of my own heartbeat. And then I heard it, a single word, whispered so softly it was almost inaudible. Said. Part 5. The final warning. I don't know how long I lay there, paralyzed with fear, before I finally worked up the courage to move. The whispers had stopped, replaced by an oppressive silence that made my ears ring. I grabbed my phone and called the landlord again, my hands trembling so badly I could barely dial the number. "You need to come over," I said, my voice shaking. "There's something in the hidden room." The landlord sighed, but he agreed to come by. When he arrived, I led him to the hidden room, my heart pounding with every step. But when we opened the door, the room was empty. The chair was gone. The landlord looked at me, his expression a mix of pity and annoyance. "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked. "Maybe you should see a doctor." I didn't know what to say. I knew what I had seen, what I had heard, but there was no proof. The landlord left, and I was alone again. That night, I heard the whispers one last time. They were softer now, almost gentle, and they seemed to be coming from the corner of the room. I turned slowly, my heart pounding as I saw the shadow again. It was smaller now, less defined, and it seemed to be fading. And then it spoke. "Thank you." The shadow disappeared, and the whispers stopped. I never heard them again. But I still can't bring myself to sit in that chair. End part, the final stand. I don't know where the courage came from, but I lunged forward, grabbing the chair and throwing it as hard as I could. It crashed into the wall, the sound echoing through the room. The figure hissed, its form flickering like a dying flame. "You dare?" I didn't let it finish. I grabbed the journal and tore out the pages, scattering them across the floor. The symbols on the walls began to glow, a faint, eerie light that pulsed in time with the figure's rage. "You can't destroy it," it screamed, its voice shaking the walls. But I wasn't trying to destroy it. I was trying to break the connection. I grabbed the lighter from the kitchen and set the pages on fire, watching as the flames consumed the symbols. The figure howled, its form twisting and writhing as the light from the symbols faded. And then, with a final, ear-splitting scream, it was gone. The room fell silent, the air warm once again. The chair was gone too, leaving only a faint scorch mark on the floor where it had been. I collapsed to the ground, my body trembling with exhaustion and relief. It was over. Epilogue. I moved out of the apartment the next day. Mrs. Henderson helped me pack, her hands still trembling as she told me about the others who had lived there before me. "You're the first one to make it out," she said, her voice filled with awe. I didn't tell her about the journal, or the chair, or the thing that had haunted me. I just nodded, my mind still reeling from everything that had happened. That as I drove away from the building, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't really over. Because as I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw something, a shadow, faint but unmistakable, sitting in the back seat. And it was smiling. See you in next story. Thank you for watching.